With the warm greetings, I extend my warmest welcome to the talk show Education 4.0 for Safe, Sustainable Societies.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the talk show organized by Samurja Educational Society on the theme Education 4.0 for Safe, Sustainable Societies. We appreciate and applaud our panelists and participants for the zeal to share and passion to learn with Samurja. Samurja means sum of creative energies, and here is a small video about Samurja. Over to Monica, please.
Samurja Educational Society, established in the year 1991, has completed its gratifying journey of 3 decades. The society was conceptualized with the objective of educating children and preparing them to be morally upright and vocationally independent. Ever since its inception, the society has continued to take tiny steps forward, redesigning the educational fabric in all possible ways through various educational activities, besides conducting social outreach programs like the Girl Next Door and the Charity War. Samurja is constantly striving to bring together some of the most united minds in the field of education to introduce change in the educational fabric of the nation by providing educational vision, empowering educators, inspiring learners, and elevating various organizations through training sessions, panel discussions, talk shows, conferences, and symposiums. The society has also conceptualized and published periodicals and magazines for students and teachers. Samurja continues to explore new domains, trends, and landscapes to enrich the educators across the country by equipping them to resolve the academic challenges in their classroom to make teaching and learning more joyous and engaging. It also helps educators realize their vision and collaborate with national and international educators to have sustainable societies and a happy nation, thus redefining the paradigms of Indian education. Jai Hind, Namaskar.
With the changing model in education, all educators across the globe are learning, exploring, and evolving. Samurja has left no stone unturned in this journey of fellow educators to bring the best mind who understand the nuances of education, especially the school education, to guide, inspire, and motivate educators. In the past couple of weeks, we are discussing how we should prepare the future-proof schools. What are the new trends, blended or hybrid approaches? What are the new modalities and how to adopt those modalities? We also discussed what success means and what is the science of success. No doubt, COVID has created huge learning gaps. In the previous episode, Professor Rajaram Sharma, former Joint Director NCERT, deliberated on re-imaging education to bridge those learning gaps. Our learners need endless feedback on their learning, then endless teaching. Assessment is an engine which drives students' learning. We must not equate assessment to testing. Assessment is an ongoing awareness of students' learning and their needs, rather than occasional event in the school calendar. Minute-to-minute observation of a student, along with the understanding of how children learn, allows a teacher to make right judgment and decisions about the child's learning. Albert Einstein once said, "Not everything that counts is counted, and not everything that can be counted counts." NEP 2020 laid fairly good emphasis on assessment. Assessment of learning, assessment for learning, assessment as learning, formative assessment, summative assessment, assessment, self-assessment, peer assessment, assessment by parents besides the regular assessment by teachers. Is there any chronological order for conduction of all those kinds of assessment? What are other elements of these assessments? Precisely, we are referring to 360-degree assessment, and that's the topic for talk show today. 360-degree holistic assessment. To deliberate on this topic, we have with us veteran in school education, a hardcore academician, Shri G. Balasubramaniam sir, former director, CBSE. We welcome you, sir. Sir, kindly extend a verbal greeting so that participants they can have a glimpse of yours.
Good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with Mukta Mishra ji and the Samurja. Right?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I request Monica ma'am to please welcome and introduce our guest with a musical note. We also have with us our mentor, Dr. Ashok Pandey, Director, Elcon Group of Schools, an internationally acclaimed educator, author of many books, and the most loved leader who believes in strategizing policies, procedure, and practices. We welcome you, sir, Dr. Ashok Pandey, Director, Elcon Group of Schools. Sir is traveling.
It is always a blessing to be in the company of Bala sir, and I'm so delighted that I could join. Thank you, Muktaji. All the best for your show.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Another charismatic leader, our mentor, and the trailblazer of this talk show, Dr. Rajesh Hasija, Director in the Prastha Group of School, who is known for his dynamic approaches in integrating technology and preparing leaders. He does not believe in repeating the things. Every time he does the things differently. We welcome you, sir, Dr. Rajesh Hasija.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to learn whatever I'm today. It's Balaji, and I'm looking forward today again to learn something new from sir. Thank you, sir, making me part.
Thank you.
Without further delay, I'll request Bala sir to please share with us what exactly this 360-degree assessment is. What are its components? What are the elements? Over to Bala sir.
Well, good evening and thank you, Muktaji. It's a pleasure to be with you. And especially when I hear the term Samurja, right? Working together, taking all aspects of energy together to maximize the potential of, any process delivery. I think that explains the impact of the 360 degrees. The very term Samurja gets well synchronized with the 360-degree assessment. And also, when you talk about education 4.0, I think that is the right context in which we should be discussing all the problems in education, because the gap between education 2.0 and industry 4.0 is something which is haunting the minds of everybody. And the very thought that you have a deliberation on education 4.0 puts a lot of energy and I must say a lot of hormones into our system, adrenaline into the system to see that some change does happen, right? Without much ado, let me go into my presentation, right? So to all my friends over here, a very good evening to all of you, and I hope everybody is doing well, and I think that's the first message that I want to give. Give you, because a year and a half before, possibly, right, we would not have started a program with this kind of a wish. We would have just delved deeply into the program. But the fact that we have gone through a number of issues in the last 1.5 years, calls for a typical 360-degree assessment of what has happened in the last 1.5 years. What all started with a small virus in some part of the China, spread all over the world. And there's a theory in mathematics, people know that is a theory of chaos. And when a butterfly flaps its wings in China, it spreads its shock waves in Chicago. And that's exactly happened. Instead of a butterfly, we had a virus which really haunted the world across. And what started as a physiological issue moved into an economic issue, and then it moved into sociological issue, academic issue, professional issue, and then you spread across like an octopus, it moved its wing. And therefore, all that what we were doing, we had to examine not from one angle, from a multipolar angle, rather on a 360-degree dimension of assessment of our own life processes. Right. That being so, talk today 360-degree assessment falls well within the reach. And as a matter of fact, the world remained closed for last 1.5 years, right? Though this particular picture will show that it represents a theater in Washington, and the theater named world is closed. But symbolically, perceptionally, it indicates that the real world was remaining closed. And what happened in the last 1.5 years, we, all of us, especially in the field of education, and with the schools being shut down, we got into the fear of the time and space, what we call the chronophobia, and then we got the fear of being sick, and we got an emetophobia. Then we got a fear into looking at people, getting in touch with people, the ometophobia, and fear of the unknown, the xenophobia. And now the psychologists have come with a new terminology called the phobophobia, phobia for being getting into phobias. And therefore, what kind of challenge an individual is undergoing to assess the psychological profile of the an individual, and more so the learner, is indeed very difficult. And at this point of time, when the schools get reopened, people are looking forward to what is called the new normal. Whether people ask a question, sir, is there a new normal in curriculum? Is there a new normal in pedagogy? Is there a new normal in the assessment? And when people look at NEP, they have too many terminologies with regard to assessment. There are many people who are fighting to differentiate between an assessment and evaluation and even an examination. Right? So the conflict between even the perceptions of these terminologies is indeed creating a lot of problem inside the school among the teachers. So it's time that organizations like Samudja come into the forefront to put across the real perspectives. And when people ask me about the new normal, I tell them a very simple thing. A new normal is one where nothing has changed, but everything is new, right? And that's the definition of a new normal. Curriculum remains the same, but the way you deliver the curriculum is going to be different. Pedagogy remains the same, but the way you deliver the pedagogy is going to be the same. Assessment has got to be the same, but the way you do the assessment, the way you perceive the assessment, the kind of tools and instruments that you use for assessment, and the way you interpret the assessment is going to be a little difficult. Therefore, what is the new normal in terms of the assessment is that 360-degree assessment is what we call the new normal of assessment. The question would arise whether we did not have a new 360-degree assessment earlier. Yes, we did have. As a matter of fact, a couple of decades before, when I was a student, when I came back from the school, when my father asked me how many marks I got in mathematics, when I said 63. He said, doesn't matter. I don't care how many marks you get, but I don't want that your teachers should say that you are, a boy with goodness mischief. His perception was different. His assessment was different. He thought a child should be, we wanted a good child rather than an intelligent child. But over the period, we wanted more intelligent children rather than good children, because we were willing to compromise with a lot of things over there. So the consumerist tendencies, competitive tendencies in the market redefined what you call the benchmark, the normal, and thereby there has been a paradigm shift in understanding education. And therefore, when you talk about an assessment here, we instead of a 360-degree assessment in the last 2 years to 2 decades or so, we focus on assessment of intellect, assessment of discipline, assessment of knowledge, rather than assessment of the holistic profile of the children. I will go back a little later. What we focused earlier on the learnability of the learner, then we came into the assessment of the learning of the learner. Now we have come to assessment of the facts assimilated by the learner, and that's a big gap over there. Thanks to the National Education Policy 2020, probably we are rehabilitating education. In other words, the gateways of education are being opened around, and we are coming with a lot of new terminologies, as Mukherjee pointed out, right? And then what does a real assessment should indicate? A good assessment, a 360-degree assessment should indicate the status of learning of a learner, right? It doesn't matter where he says. It doesn't have to be on the top of the learning curve, but what is his status? Because that's what's going to be diagnostic. That is what is going to support the, the learning blocks over there. It should reflect on the quality of learning, right? Because today, most of the assessments are focusing on the quantum of learning rather than the quality of learning. Therefore, there is a process-product conflict in the assessment today. We focus on the product of, learning rather than the process of learning. And therefore, assessment has to be understood as an intervention, just like we call an interventional cardiologist in a theater. Similarly, we have an interventional academician who is, working in the classroom in order to assess the child periodically, so that both diagnostic as well as remedial interventions to be made in the process of learning. Further, a good assessment in the classroom should also identify what are the psychological roadblocks for the learning, what are the the physical roadblocks for the learning, and thereby the role of the teacher will become more of a mentor in order to facilitate, in order to remove the roadblocks of learning and to enhance the learning dynamics. I think that's a very important thing. Today, we don't talk about catalyzing learning. We don't talk about facilitating the self-learning so that the process of learning becomes a process of discovery, right? But today, we are we are fighting with static learning rather than dynamic learning. I think 360-degree opens up another opportunity for that. Yet another factor is that all learning should lead to further learning. All learning should lead to insight. All learning should lead to introspection. All learning should lead to expansion, right? But unfortunately, all learning has become restrictive to the pangs of a textbook, to the facts given in the textbook. Therefore, the 360-degree learning should facilitate the learner to open up the windows of his mind and the knowledge to see that further learning is possible. In all that process, the ultimate goal of a good 360-degree learning is that it leads to a self-awareness of the learner, so that he positions himself in a context, he positions himself in a cohort, he positions himself in a school community, and therefore he understands where he is and what he should be, and how does his learning matches with his aptitude, matches with his attitude, and matches with the opportunities available for learning. Because I may have a number of things available to me, but then I don't have the access to learning, access to opportunities. I think I'm having a roadblock there. Therefore, a good 360 degrees learning is what is called a good mental health care system, in order to facilitate the learner to be a healthy individual in the process of his learning over there. In this process, we have used examinations more as an instrument. Unfortunately, we have considered examinations more as a what do you call, the one and the one all of assessing the children. I think that is the greatest grave mistake what we have done. Examinations have done more for a social cause and a social purpose. They are more totally de-linked learning from from the real learning to a textual learning, and they are more provoked the competition and stress amongst the learners over that. In order that we go into comparative learning, we move into competitive learning rather than self-driven learning. In other words, the learnability being fulfilled is not happening around. We have what is called compensatory and complementary learning that's happening around with the examination system, right? Consequently, we have this problem of the chicken, the egg, whether the pedagogy will change in order to make a good assessment, or whether the assessment will change in order to make a good pedagogy. This conflict of throwing the ball this way and that way has happened. Thanks to the National Education Policy 20D0, it has put things in perspective. We need to understand that assessment and pedagogy and curriculum are concentric to each other and not eccentric to each other. Both of them are, all of them are woven into a beautiful fabric, and therefore every single word uttered by the teacher in the class, every single word put across in a textual material or learning process is good enough for assessment, and therefore my teacher doesn't have to wait for an examination to happen to assess, right? Assessment should happen in context, right? And that, I think, is a good form of this one. Further, learning is never a linear process. Learning is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, whether you like it or not. Learning is both formal and informal, and the beautiful capacity of the human brain, the capacity what we call the synesthesia, to put all facts together and to create convergence of knowledge and divergence of knowledge. That is what has to be assessed by the school in a good 360-degree learning. But what we have done is we don't appreciate convergence, we don't appreciate divergence, we appreciate the repetition of facts that is given in that. That is an irony of so examinations have remained more as social indicators. I don't worry about the examination of a board, but unfortunately enough, even the examinations conducted by the school, including the midterm examinations or a weekly test what you conduct, have not focused on the portfolio management of the learner, but it has only what you call facilitated social indicators, how we can please the parent, how we can please the board, how we can please the instrument. So when you look at the kind of the learning profile, you can look at the child, what do you call the learning graph of the child. Either it could be a slow process of moving from the bottom to the top, or it could be for talented people, the graph could just shoot up like anything. So in a classroom with different individuals with different learning capacities, what we do is we all try to encave them, enclose them into a normal distribution curve. And that's an irony. We try to propose we used to take the normal distribution curve and put it across on the head of every child, performance of every child. Rather, it's time that we understand normal distribution curve is good enough for a major cohort, for a board like, for a nation like, for a society like. But when you come to an individual, when you come to a classroom, there's no point in thinking of a normal distribution curve within a classroom. Every child may be a gifted learner, but in a different direction. So your assessment, your 360-degree assessment, should facilitate a child, whether he is in art, whether he is in music, right? And basically disciplines are only what you call pathways to understand how the brain works. Where they are pathways to understand how the competency of the brain, the skills of the learner, the competencies of the learner have grown up over a period of time. But unfortunately, we fight with facts given in the book, and I think that was a big thing. And I think with the new national education policy coming through, our focus will shift from the normal distribution curve, which is good enough for a nation, which is good enough for a community, but it has to come to what you call the learner, and we should celebrate the learning curve of each and every child. As a matter of fact, the progress report given by each school should give, with the technology being available, the learning graph of the child for every learner, and that's what the parent should be able to do that. So that's why look at this picture, which I often love to see. There are 10 blind men trying to identify the elephant over there. Our process of assessment so long has been only like that. Everybody trying to say that learning is good when the behaviorism is true. Learning is good when cognitivism is good. Learning is good when there is a constructivism. But then learning is much beyond all these isms over there. All the farmers that we have had in this country, all the artisans we have had in this country have been, giving exemplary performance of their skills in a variety of fields, be it from economics to management to soil science, whatever available. But unfortunately, we found that they could not be fixed within the framework of our assessment tools, and therefore we discarded. And therefore, for ages together, we have had a beautiful 360-degree assessment as a social dimension rather than an academic dimension. I think that ability to, appreciate the multifaceted learnability of a learner is all that is what is required over there. And, decades before, we brought CCE as one of the methods to have a 360-degree assessment. And I know pretty well, we very successfully, prepared the term for the CCE. That was the reason being that there was a total mismatch between pedagogy and the assessment. Right, and I only wish and pray that with the new education policy, with the kind of assessment we talked about, unless we bring concurrent changes in pedagogy, concurrent changes in curriculum management, any method of prescription for assessment is not going to be successful. Right, and therefore that is what is required is a total change in the mindset of the school teachers and the school managers. But this cannot be done without taking parents into consideration, because parents over the years have got a mindset that my child should get 99. Let's take an example of a board this time getting 99 point super number of people getting by a pass examination. Right, I have nothing to say about that, but the question basically is now look at the national normal distribution curve and try to fit it into this one. It doesn't suit anywhere. Therefore, let's try to understand that we are using assessment, as a matter of convenience, as a matter of, comforting our intent rather than making it credible and reliable and valid. So whether it's even in a classroom, 360-degree assessment when you do, even a teacher when he or she does it, it has got to be credible, it has got to be valid, and it has got to be sensitive, right? And so long there is no truth and honesty in the case of assessment, you will find whether it's 360-degree or 180-degree, whatever it is not going to be relevant. That's why I insist on the fact that parents have to be taken as a very important stakeholders in preparing this kind of the mindset. And further, when you talk of an assessment, holistic assessment, a holistic assessment, trespasses into various domains of knowledge. You don't talk of physics, you don't talk of chemistry. In other words, you talk of science as a scientific temper, you talk of mathematical thinking as a process, and therefore, we must be able to break open our faculties and see the competency of a child in a total perspective. Therefore, my teachers have got to outgrow their limitations of a topic, if they have to be successful in 360-degree assessment. Because 360-degree assessment, which is a very good synergy between the formal and informal learning, will happen only when we are able to accept the child outside the classroom, right? Unless the competencies of the child which are celebrated outside the classroom are brought inside the class, you will find there is a problem. In other words, there is a reverse osmosis which is happening around. In my days, the flow was from knowledge flow was from school to outside. Today, the knowledge flow is from outside to the school. And therefore, there is a reverse osmosis. So if you have to be successful in 360-degree, you have to get over the process product conflict over there. The focus has to be on the process of learning. The focus has to be on the process of educating the child rather than how many marks he's going to get. That is only a byproduct over there. So the additional education policy, when it talks about the assessment, it has given a beautiful picture. I'm sure all of you would have seen that it is absolutely a holistic process, right? The most important thing in this, what I'm happy is that this policy is the first policy which talks about learning from 0 to 15 years. I think that's a very important thing, because the very acknowledgement that learning doesn't happen only in the school, it comes from the prenatal stage, is a fact that a parent assesses a child, a mother assesses a child, but with the smile of a child, with the tear of the child, the mother assesses the child. That's also an assessment. Therefore, please remember that assessment is not an exclusive propriety of a school. It is not the exclusive propriety of a teacher. And that's why you find all stakeholders coming through. And therefore, when you look at the 360-degree assessment, you remember one thing: this acknowledges the fact that every learner is unique. That unless you understand the uniqueness of the learner, you will find that 360-degree will diffuse beautifully. When I talk about the 360-degree, I was just quoting a few minutes back a beautiful quote by Ingersoll, who was an iconoclast. That was about God, and he gave a beautiful definition. He said, God is like a circle with center everywhere and circumference nowhere, right? And that really means it's a point circle. And that's what you really see in the class. Everybody is an efficient learner, right? You see that kind of competence in every child. Therefore, unless you acknowledge that every child is capable of learning, you will not be able to appreciate 360. Because when I go to, as a teacher, when I go to assess a set of answer books, I immediately look at, oh, this class, Rajesh Hasija is a best student. Therefore, I will take the paper of Rajesh Hasija. I will see what he does, and I will start evaluating everybody else on the paper of Rajesh Hasija. That's the kind of the mindset that we are having. And therefore, we don't let anybody else perform better than Rajesh Hasija because of the mindset that what we have. And therefore, friends, very important. A good teacher goes to the class with an open mind, because some child may be very good in cognitive domain, some child may be very good in affective domain, and some child may be very good in the psychomotor domain, right? That all of them got a conceptual stability, conceptual clarity, but they express it in a different format. And then we will talk about the 3 different assessments. I enjoyed a very interesting quote. When a teacher asked a question to a child, the child said, "Ma'am, jawab to yahan tak hai, bahar nahi aa raha hai." Right? That's a self-assessment of the child. Pass wala ladka jo baitha tha na, he says, "Ma'am, he knows the answer 2 days before he told me, but he has forgotten it." That's a peer assessment. And now teacher says, तुम यहाँ तक है कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, जब तक आंसर नहीं आएगा मार्क नहीं दूंगा. That's a teacher-led assessment. Now you understand that conflict. The child knows he is unable to communicate. The friends know that he knows very well, but that has no validity. The teacher doesn't care whether the child or the friends know, and that's a conflict that we are getting in the kind of the assessment that we are having. So the 3 assessments: self-assessment, peer assessment, and teacher. And what's important in all that, the rubrics to be developed for all these things is very important. How the NCRT or other psychologists, educational psychologists are going to come to put across what kind of rubrics that be done, what kind of syntaxes that has to be used, because communication of the assessment is all that is very important. Again, when it comes to self-assessment and peer assessment of the learner, the the indicators for the assessment, the tools of assessment, evidences of assessment, because very often we talked about evidence-based assessment. We also talked about it could be even anecdotal-based assessment, no problem. And I think the construct of a portfolio for assessment becomes very, very significant in the 360 assessment. Add to that, what happens is the national policy has talked about inquiry-based assessment quizzes and all that. All that becomes very significant, especially in the context of the NCRT coming through, removing the curtain between scholastic and co-scholastic activities. When you have removed that curtain, it becomes very significant that there's a huge opportunity to see assessment in its holistic perspective. And no wonder you find that the link between the school and the house is being established at the point of time, with academic and vocational barricades being removed, with experiential learning removed. And again, I want to make a very interesting difference. When I was talking to one of the schools on experiential learning, people were talking about assessing experiential learning, right? They said, "Sir, we have so many tools. Actually, बच्चे जो है ना lab में इतना काम करते हैं then I had to tell them that experimental learning is different from experiential learning. That's a very important thing, because in doing an assessment of experiential learning, people should not think that laboratory mein kaam ho jayega. Cognitive experiences, emotional experiences, psychomotor experiences, social experiences, so many are there, right? So, well, similarly, for art integration, mathematical thinking, all that. Your backless days in the NEPA talks about, again talks for an open-ended assessment over that. Therefore, what is required is that whether it's assessment for learning, assessment on learning, or assessment as learning is very important. When it comes to self-assessment, values, interest, personality, aptitude are the indicators which are better judged by the child, because he becomes his own spokesman. We are not going to talk about the ideas and what you call concepts and facts, because there is a huge opportunity for assessing this under the self-assessment. But then, you know, self-assessment is a very important factor for encouraging reflection. I think that's I think will help the child to be self-confident, discovering, and also authentic about his own way of learning process. So as I said, rubrics, scripts, journals, portfolios. Now they said traffic lights is a very interesting way of doing that. I'm sure that most of you understand. And exit cards in most professional dimensions. Exit card is that after, what is an exit card? After a concept is done, the child gives an exit card. I have understood the concept. I have not understood the concept. This is the problem that they are having. So these exit cards will help the teacher to take an objective view of how successful he or she has tested, taught, and then would do that. So friends, when it comes to the peer assessment, you will find that peer assessment is mutually supportive, mutually inclusive, collaborative in nature, and therefore it facilitates co-construction of knowledge. It facilitates in the social construction of knowledge. I think building team, I think that's a call of the future, and therefore peer assessment is a very important dimension at this point of time. It will also increase the respectability among the learner there. And lastly, that I would like to say that when you talk about the teacher-led assessment, I think it's a very important thing. Our mindset for the teacher-led assessment has to change, because we more normally think that the objectives are what is defined by learning objective. Learning objective is not the exclusive aspect of the teacher-led assessment. It travels beyond it. The objective of seeing a whole personality, the objective of seeing a healthy mind is also a part of the teacher-led assessment. So please remember, my teacher, the objectives have to be redefined when it comes to that. That's a responsibility of most heads of institutions or organizations like Samurja. When you talk about, take specific topics on how do we define the objectives of assessment for teacher-led. And similarly, the scope of assessment has also increased, because the universe of knowledge, universe of operation is expanding. Therefore, scale, norms, benchmarks, all this credibility, everything has got to be redefined. Well, I may not have time to talk more on that, but remember, finally, a good 360-degree assessment should lead to metacognition, right? Because one of the major challenges in human brain is condition, is very fond of making patterns. Once it sets a pattern, it gets addicted to the pattern, or ye to chalta rehta hai. And I think that is an irony of this one. A good 360-degree assessment should lead to metacognition in such a way the child is able to reflect what he has done, and child is able to see, what do you call, the scope for learning. It will break the stereotypes of learning. It will, facilitate, a willingness for the child, a cause for change. He will accept that there is a need for change. And finally, it will also promote his self-esteem. I think that is all that. One word for the parents that you have to do, that schools and other social organizations have a great role to play to educate the parents that they should not expect the same kind of curriculum delivery. They cannot expect the same kind of pedagogical delivery with flipped classroom, with blended classrooms, with all kinds of inputs coming through with technology, artificial intelligence and augmented reality is impacting curriculum assessment as well as the pedagogy. The whole way methodology of what we are going to do is changing. And to me, that a good assessment, 360-degree assessment, has got to be a compass for the identification of success and excellence, and a school and a teacher should navigate the process of that. To me, 360-degree assessment is going to make things very stress-free. Lastly, I will put this slide to you on a neurocognitive approach, that brain sciences have very clearly said that learning is not linear, learning is multipolar, learning is impacted by emotions and environment, learning goes beyond memory, and learning networks go on changing continuously. All this support the idea of 360-degree assessment, that you cannot have a standardized norm of that to say that this is the assessment. Friend, I will conclude saying that the national education policy has given a challenge. So far, we talked about testing knowledge. So far, we talked about testing skills. We talked about testing competencies. We talked about testing teaching. We talked about testing learning. Now, the future is for testing learnability of the learner rather than the learning of the learner. We have to move from even learning-centric classroom rooms to the next stage, what you call education 4.0, where you say learnability matters rather than all that you have learned. Thank you, Mr. D, for this beautiful opportunity. I hope I have something to.
Thank you, sir. Very nicely you have explained the 360-degree holistic assessment. And I think for the first time, we have heard enough criticism, enough appreciation for CCE, but it's the first time I have heard that it could not be carried forward because of the mismatch of pedagogy and assessment, because of the mismatch of process and product, and definitely the absence of the appropriate tools. Very well you have said. Sir, there is a question from the participants that the students, they have been promoted to the next classes without a strategic or standardized assessment. Now they are in the next classes. How to assess them now in the coming academic session?
That's a very interesting question to me. See, we have already damaged the whole system, right? And then see, let me put it in a very positive way. Why do we care what they have learned or what they have not learned? Why do we care whether they are given 30 marks or 100 marks? There are enough evidences for people who got 30 marks last time getting 99 marks this time, and there are people who got 99 this time, got 30 at this point of time, right? So let us not play with the marks, Very often people ask me a very good question to me, right? Sir, what do you think is a good mark for us to go up in life? I said a boy who gets 50 marks out of 100 in class 10 examination could become a director of CBSE. So people getting 99 in CBSE could go anywhere else, right? So let us not deal with marks. Let's deal with the competency and the, developing the skill of the learners. Am I right, Rajesh?
I fully agree with you, sir, that marks has no variant to label a child. It is actually the competency of a child which makes a difference.
It may be a temporary tonic to celebrate over a cup of tea, or maybe with a snack or with a cake, right? Next day, these marks have no relevance.
So if the presentation is over, you can stop sharing the screen. We also have with us our special guest, Mrs. Lata Vaidyanathan, an epitome in school education. Welcome, Lata ma'am. She's also traveling, I believe.
Thank you, Mukta. It was as usual, excellence in oration, excellence in learning when you listen to somebody like Balaji. There is
Thank you, Lata. So nice of you.
There's very little someone can say after you have spoken, with only the subject being of extraordinary interest to us, being because that we are all in the threshold of this change. Sometimes we are at the beginning point of a change. Sometimes there'll be people who will be at the end point of a change. Actually, there's no end, like he says, it's a point. Which has no circumstance, a cycle with a center with no circumference. So when I was listening to him, I was wondering at what stage of my own learning I was. Where am I at this point? And how responsible do I feel when I listen to so many people saying things which are so relevant, and yet the movement from understanding, learning, or the metacognition, as he said, filtering down to the last man on board in this entire transportation of learning, as I call it, for unfortunately for want of words, is something which deeply concerns me, because I think we are all living in layers, and this country actually can see the layers. And there are schools which will function on total learning quality, as is envisaged in the part of the talk that Balaji referred to. There are others who have still not even started textbooks. There are others, schools which have no blackboards. But I always believed in what Dr. Mashelkar used to say. So I'm not a pessimist. I would love the way Dr. Mashelkar, and that is my guiding star. He would say we are like a pond of lilies. The lily has the ability to double every night. And whenever you ask yourself, when will you be full? If you say you're half full today, when will you be full? The answer should be as quick as tomorrow. So there is this huge progress which happens. There is this huge jump which happens. And we are all waiting for that final leap. And I think the leap of our Mr. Chopra, the javelin throw, is what I'm waiting for it to happen. That leap, Neeraj Chopra's leap, will happen, is my faith. Because people are not going to go through all those stages, like he mentioned, whether it's behaviorism, whether it is cognition, whether it is constructivism, or more recently, connectivism. And we are in some part of a connectivist world, actually. And what is technology? Will the debate on tech and touch continue? Will the debate on technology-enabled learning supersede? What will be the impact of tooling on learning? And how has the quality really changed from our Gurukul days? Has that been diluted and restructured through technology now? I actually feel less informed about which direction things are going. And I do feel that I'm sometimes I feel I'm ahead in the spiral of learning. Sometimes I feel I'm locked in a circle of learning. Sometimes I feel I don't know whether my learning is moving, but I do believe it's a spiral. So I don't think I'm pitched like Dr. Hasija in technology, but I understand what it can do. Because you ask me which is the tool to use, maybe I'm not the best answer. But if you ask me, will a tool be required? I can debate it and say yes and no. That is where my learning process normally finds the debate. But the fact is, can children raise opinions? Can they raise debates? Can we assess the quality of the process? Are we equipped as pedagogists or as teachers to deal with all this? Is the 360 part of it? Balaji really simplified it so beautifully to say, I knew it yesterday and I don't know today. Self-learning. Somebody saying he knew it yesterday, I heard him say so. The question was, this world, in the name of equity, when it brings down in the marks and levels it off, that is where the problem is. The problem is not with the schooling system. In our country, it is the higher education system.
Yeah. I just want to share, Lataji, want to share one experience with permission of Muktaji. Mukta, I remember, still recall an event, when Lataji was the principal of a school in Parvanu, which really impacted my life. I went there and I was visiting a few classrooms. And I still remember when I went to a classroom, Hindi classroom, and the Hindi teacher had displayed some poems on the notice board. I looked at some of them and there was a poem on on the Kargil War. It was a fantastic poem in Hindi. Immediately I turned to the teacher who wrote it, and the 6th class child stood up and said, "Sir, I wrote it." And I was surprised, but then I was a little foolish. I asked a question and it shook me so much till today. And I asked the little girl, "Tum to itni choti ho, tumne Kargil ke bare mein likha hai. If you have to go to Kargil, what will you do if you go to Kargil?" I asked a very stupid question. You know what she said? "Sir, agar main Kargil jaungi to main pani pilaungi." You won't believe, I was almost shaken to earth. I think the fantastic answer I would have got. Now you tell me, how do I assess a child? 360 degrees. Do I go by the letter of song she has written? Or do I go by what marks she gets around? Or what the spirit that she has got? That is the 360 degree assessment.
Actually, those are our teachers in the learning process.
That's right.
Those children teach us, because the stakeholders have a role in teaching us a few things. I remember a similar incident in the same school. In fact, that was my nursery of learning, and I'm so grateful to God. I asked the child, "What will you be when you grow up?" She says, "I want to be a bird." I said, "No, you can't grow up and become a bird. Can you change that?" She said, "Okay, in that case, I think I want to be a pilot." I said, "Why?" So the answer was, because sky has no boundaries of countries. I mean, a 12, 14-year-old telling me this, aaj se 30 saal pehle, I would think we have had.
I have
Dr. Hasija is raising the hand. Yes, sir.
Bala sir, I have two questions from you.
Please.
And this is again, as I said, you are my mentor. Whatever I learn from you. Today,
Mahaguru Hasija. Mahaguru.
Yeah. All of us are learning. Don't worry. Carry on.
So, sir, picking up your words, you rightly said every child is a passionate learner, but assessment labels a child. You gave your own example that assessment has changed the child from a good one to an intelligent child. I want to know why this is so. Number one, I have two questions connected with this. So why this change of perception from good to intelligent? On the other hand, I remember Dronacharya, when he was in Gurukul teaching these five princes, he, focused on values, focused on interest, focused on personality, attitude, motivation, and gave 5 Pandavas to the world, to India. We as parents look all these values into one child, and we want our child as 5 Pandavas. Why it is so? Where things are going wrong? Is it a conflict of processes, product, or parenting?
Well, I think, Rajesh, the whole point is you have to look at the dynamics of the society in toto. This is consequent to the paradigm shift that education, which was a process which was going within, has gone outside. Pre-independence, before Macaulay's time, if you look at the whole education, it was a process of self-empowerment. Now, with the consumerist model that's coming through, that we have to work for a job, we have to have these kinds of competencies, the entire paradigm has gone outside. Okay, therefore, the people and the whole society, parents, everybody, because the moment you get a job, the high salary job, the low salary job, all that led to what you call defining a person from his external standard of life rather than the quality of life. Okay, so the education, which was an instrument for assessment of the quality of life of an individual as a good passionate, good human being, it moved towards an intelligent human being, where they started comparatively, he is better than this, better than that, like that. So this is the paradigm shift, what do you call, impact of the external society, right? I just want to share one more example to you. Once when I went somewhere to and was returning, I had to stop my car for because I was very thirsty. I got into a shop and I was taking a glass of juice along with my driver. I left my wallet over there along with my passport. Forgot. After 2 minutes, the two of the boys who were standing there, one of them called me up and telephoned, "Sir, you have left your wallet here." I returned by car, my car within 2 to 3 minutes, right? One of them who was a software engineer, he said, "Sir, are you a director of CBSE?" I said, "Yes, we are all students of CBSE." I was so happy that he was a student. But then when he gave the ballot, he told me, "Sorry, sir, no service is free. We have been waiting for you for 5 minutes to give this. So you have to pay for the cost of the juice that we have taken for that. And 150 rupees you have to pay." Now I had a question. Was that a quality? Was that a standard? So maybe they are engineers, they are software engineers, they are earning 40,000, 50,000 rupees. So you remember your education doesn't. So when it comes to 360-degree assessment, for example, when you talk of total quality management in education, we talk about total quality person as the definition of total quality management. I think 360-degree focuses on developing that kind of a total quality person.
There is one question, sir, that how a teacher can prepare a student to do the peer assessment.
See, the point basically is there are several ways of preparing the peer. Okay. Now, basically, the emotional compatibility of the two learners have to be, at most nearby, so that, they do a fair assessment of each other. That's one critical factor, because some kind of superiority or inferiority between these two people might lead to a kind of emotion-based assessment. Okay. Now, I think the rubrics and the syntax for the whole thing is very much necessary. I think that's what I'm really looking for from the NCERT, what kind of rubrics and the syntax that they are going to give. But basically, the emotional compatibility of the cohort which is doing the assessment in peer is very important to have a fair, free, and judicious assessment.
Dr. Asija, I'll just ask a question. Suppose in the coming academic session, you invite the assessment from the parents. And when we see usually the parents, every parent loves their own child. And we are quite expecting that the grades or the marks, they will be inflated. How you will, balance it, how you will link it with the performance of the child in the school, with the peer and with the parent. Dr. Asija, over to you. Kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. See, when Balaji said that why do you compare 30 marks to 90 marks? To my mind, inflation of marks or reduction of marks should not be a concern as much as whether we have learned something during this time or not. I again quote Balaji when he said, learning, every learner is a passionate learner. Every child is a passionate learner. So learning happens. As long as learning is happening, why to label them you are a high achiever, you are a low achiever, or you are an average? I would write
to linking. I'm referring to linking the two assessment, the parental assessment and the assessment in the school, or the assessment by a peer. I mean, there is no structure at the moment. Otherwise, as an educator, I'm just asking you. So we can't hear you.
Can I make an intervention?
Yes, sir. Please.
You see, that's a very critical thing. You are absolutely right that parents have got are very emotional about their children, and therefore they would like to, be very liberal. And even if they say teacher ne padhaya hai par isko samajh mein nahi aaya isliye nahi kiya hai, these kinds of all the nuances they will give. But I think proper guidelines, as I've been repeating the same word, rubrics and syntax. And I think even for parents, you have got to give evidence-based assessment, especially when it comes to parents. No anecdotal assessment to be given. Anecdotal assessments can be done well by the teacher, but when it comes to parents, you've got to give evidence-based assessment and clear syntax on what you call the positive profiling of the learner. Because very important that your parents get annoyed when there is a negative profiling of the learner. So let's be very good to them and give positive profiling, but it's important to grade them in the positive profiling, and therefore the rubrics have to be established.
There are so many other questions, but time is not permitting us, and we want to continue. This is a topic which we can actually take for 2 or 3 more sessions. There are questions, but I'll forward those questions to Bala sir.
You're welcome.
There are questions related to how 360-degree can be linked with the blooms and the other parameters. Sir, I'll forward those questions. It's the time that we must wrap up.
I will do that. I will
So much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bala sir, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Asija. Thank you, Dr. Ashok Pandey, Lata ma'am. Very graciously, you accepted the invitation and you joined us. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Monica and Kriti. And I'll request Kriti ma'am to please propose the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm able to recall one quote of Benjamin Franklin right now. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. Good evening, everyone. I, Kriti Kapoor, on behalf of Samurja Educational Society, would like to thank our key speaker for today, Dr. G. Balasubramaniam sir, for enlightening us with his knowledge. I also take the privilege to thank Mrs. Lata ma'am, Dr. Rajesh Asira sir, and Dr. Ashok Pandey sir for joining us today. I would like to thank Dr. Mukta Mishra ma'am for giving us opportunity to be part of such informative talk shows. I want to thank the team Samurja and Monica ma'am who really worked hard to make every talk show successful. I also thank all the participants present here for paying your attention and learning. Once again, thank you everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kriti. To you also, you equally do hard work. You know, your hard work is also not mentioned, but I think your role is the most. Thank you, Kriti. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye,
Bala sir.
Vinny. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala sir. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. It's
And
very
thank you, Lata
enlightening.
ma'am.
Look back. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.